Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Pink Flame of Liberty. I hope you are having an awesome Christmas. While this is airing, I am out with my Christmas present from the world's greatest husband. He bought me a bow for this Christmas. I will share some photographs and video of me learning to shoot this bow on my YouTube channel at Pink Flame of Liberty, which is on YouTube. As I said, youtube.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I'm so excited. This is not for hunting, as you know from past episodes. I am, in fact, a pacifist. I don't hunt, though I would not hesitate to shoot an animal that was coming at me to attack me, just not a person. And again, for those of you who missed that, it is for religious reasons and not political reasons. When it comes to politics, I absolutely and utterly defend your right to defend yourself with any weapon of defense you deem proportionally necessary. So in this week, oh, before I forget, you can reach me at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com with any questions or comments. Also, you can inquire there about advertising opportunities. As we come up to this new year, it is vitally imperative that I do find some advertisers. A lot of the radio time is paid for me personally, and that's not something I can continue to do in the new year. So if you believe in having a very consistent, principled, libertarian message going across the airwaves in Weld County, Colorado, please do consider becoming an advertiser on this show. Otherwise, you can simply support my YouTube channel at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty, and anything you can do is greatly appreciated. So now on this Christmas Day, unfortunately, because politics doesn't stop even for holy days, we have to talk about a retrospective as to what's going on in this country. The past 2 years have seen us utterly transformed. I don't think any of us could have anticipated in 2019 what 2020 and 2021 would look like. It's an absolute dystopian nightmare. And the fact that many of our fellow Americans are just sitting still for this is just absolutely appalling, abhorrent, and shocking. So we're going to go over some things this time of what's going on in the news. And we're also going to go over a debate that had just happened, at least the opening statement of it, at the Soho Forum. This debate was of interest to me because one of the candidates for the national chair of the Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, was on the side of pro-freedom, debating against another quote-unquote libertarian. And I put quote-unquote libertarian here because this is an issue that I do think is a dividing line. Mandates, mandated vaccines are a dividing line. You cannot hold to vaccine mandates and be a libertarian, period. I rarely make those kinds of statements, but I make them now, at least as far as COVID goes. I'm not debating other ones that might be in place. I don't hold to those either, but I haven't given them enough thought to say whether I'm going to throw you out of the libertarian family for them. If I'm to be consistent, I probably would, but I don't like speaking out of turn. And right now, we're talking about a disease that has a fantastically high survival rate, that you are talking about forcefully injecting things into people's bodies. And that is just absolutely and utterly unacceptable. Let me tell you a little story, a little vignette of what brought this home to me. I have a very good friend. He's not a libertarian. I've known him for a really long time. I actually knew him when I used to own the Theology Web discussion forum. He's not a Christian, he's an atheist. We had a lot of atheist participants there, which I was really proud of, to have these kinds of discussions. But he apparently, he volunteers, I think, with the National Guard or some form of the service where he can get called up occasionally. And I believe it's the National Guard. I think that's the only kind that can be. Forgive me, I'm not a military person. And he had basically said to me, and this is going to be a paraphrase, I wish I had saved that discussion. I could probably find it in my timeline if I really, really looked on Facebook. But he basically had said to me, and this was in the beginning of 2021, that if he were called upon to do it, he would go out and round up Americans that had refused to be vaccinated and hold them down and forcefully vaccinate them. And he said, yes, I would even do that to you. And if you resisted, I'd shoot you. Unreal. And this was a friend. And that was just so chilling to me. Because this is not an evil man, though he said an evil thing. And if we think that there isn't enough people in our country that would follow those orders, you are fooling yourselves. If you think there's not enough people in this country that would follow the orders to confiscate guns, you are absolutely fooling yourself. And we are on the road to a violent, bloody civil war. And I do not want to see that happen, but I am feeling powerless in the face of it. So to go back to this debate I did the little intro for, Angela McArdle is running for national chair. I think right now she is the best hope to put the Libertarian Party, the only political party in this country that actually stands for freedom. I'm sorry, Republicans, you do not. And whether you believe this or not, I'm going off on another tangent. If Trump had been the one to impose these draconian measures that Biden has, most of you Trump supporters would have been right behind it. It is so partisan, just like you see with the Democrats. They were against the vaccine because it was a Trump vaccine until Biden got into power. And some people out there, even listening to my voice, are against these mandates because they're Biden mandates. But if Trump had done it, you would have been just kissing both his right and left butt cheek. And you can deny it all you want, but you know in your heart it's true. So the Libertarian Party is, in fact, the only party that is any hope right now of supporting actual freedom. But our Libertarian National Committee is an absolute corrupt dumpster fire. And that needs to be corrected at our national convention in May in Reno. We have conventions every 2 years. I'm not sure. I think the Republicans and Democrats just have them on presidential years. But we re-elect our national committee every 2 years. And Angela McArdle is the best hope to turn this party around. And I hope I am honored enough to be elected as her secretary. It would be an absolute privilege to finally serve under a national chair I can respect and get behind. But she did this debate and did a fantastic job. I'll probably cover her statements in another show. But in this show, and I'll state the link to it, maybe I'll create a tiny URL for it so you guys can find this debate really easy. You need to listen to it. But I want to deal with the opening statement of her alleged libertarian opponent, a fellow from the Cato Institute. And since I was speaking of my husband earlier, are you in the market to buy or sell your home? If you are, I would ask that you consider engaging a liberty-loving realtor that I can vouch for on the highest terms, my beloved husband, Wayne Harlos of the Harlos Real Estate Team. And this isn't just because he's my husband and bought me a bow, and he and I obviously have excellent taste. That was kind of weird, wasn't it, for me to say that he has excellent taste, but he at least has excellent taste in bows, but I think he does in women as well as I do in men. That just came out all weird. We have shared a home office for years, and in that time, I have seen the utmost time and care he takes with every client. I have bought and sold several houses in the past, and never did any realtor take this time and care, no matter the dollar value. In fact, my experience has been that if you're a first-time home buyer or seller, and even more so, if you're in the lower value of the market, the starter home, the first-time home buyer, that realtors have bigger fish to fry, and they spend the least amount of time with you and try to rush you into a contract. At least that's been my experience. That is not how Wayne operates. In fact, he takes so much care and time that when job duties call, I'm often left unhappy and waiting. Getting a good and caring realtor is one of the most important decisions you can make, so please consider giving Wayne a call at 303-229-3435 or emailing him at wayne@harlosrealestateteam.com. If he doesn't service your area, he will help you find a good agent. And even if you're not quite ready yet to buy or sell, he is still glad to offer advice. Again, his phone number is 303-229-3435, or you can email him at wayne@harlosrealestateteam.com. We thank you so much for supporting him. Okay, as I said, when we get back from the first break, we're going to play the opening statement by Ilya Somin, who was defending the side of vaccine mandates in the Soho Forum debate with Angela McArdle. Now, I didn't like the presupposition of the debate because it was very broad, and I felt Ilya really played a debater's trick because what he kept doing was pointing to the broadness of the proposition was that vaccine mandates can sometimes be justified. And he would say, well, this isn't just talking about COVID mandates, it's talking about any kind of vaccine mandate over the course of history. And he brought in smallpox and polio. And then he would say, not always justified, but sometimes justified. Okay, welcome back everyone, and continuing the thought that I was cut off on. Well, this isn't just talking about COVID mandates, it's talking about any kind of vaccine mandate over the course of history. And he brought in smallpox and polio. And then he would say, not always justified, but sometimes justified. Now, technically in debate terms, he is correct. But the fact is, we all know what this debate was really about. And he could have brought up that technically, to a lot of people, he could have won on the very broad parameters, but that is a slick debater's trick when everyone absolutely knew what was really at stake here is COVID vaccine mandates. And I did not appreciate that sleight of hand of his at all. If you don't know, I'm quite a skilled debater myself, and I'm not saying that as some kind of humble brag. I owned a debate forum for well over a decade. I've participated in hundreds of written debates and several verbal ones, but most of them have been in writing. I know what I'm doing, and I know a slick debater's trick when I hear it. But you'll hear it as we go into the opening. Again, he's technically right, but avoiding the elephant in the room. And during the break, I did in fact create a tiny URL. Let me get it up on the screen here. With my shameless grifting, I suppose. Let me see if I can put this towards the top. There we go. The tiny URL for y'all listening in Weld County on air is tinyurl.com/mandates suck. And you can watch the entire debate there. But let's go through it a bit, piece by piece. Just the opening, Ilya Somin's opening. So I'm going to play the little intro, and we don't want to run afoul of copyright here, and we will start and stop and listen to part of this intro. So let's go.
Is there a libertarian case for vaccine mandates?
I can end this debate right now. No.
Mason University law professor Ilya Somin supports vaccine mandates in certain cases because he believes they're a relatively small infringement on freedom and are preferable to harm reduction strategies like mass mandates and lockdowns, which he...
Okay, going to stop right here. We will get into this a lot more, and I do have to start and stop for copyright purposes. There's no trade-off with freedom. You don't get to decide what is a small infringement to anybody. You only get to decide what is infringements that you are willing to accept for yourself, and if you accept them, then they are not infringements.
As posing a greater threat to our liberties. Angela McArdle, the chair of the Libertarian Party of Los Angeles County, says she'll actively work to destroy any institution that tries to enforce a vaccine passport.
And I will join her. That vaccine mandates need to die in a fire, painfully.
Currently launching legal challenges to overturn vaccine mandates in California and New York. On Wednesday, September 8th, Somin and McArdle went head-to-head at the Soho Forum in New York City. Somin took the affirmative and McArdle the negative on the resolution. While vaccine mandates are an infringement on freedom, some are justified due to their big payoff in lives saved. The debate was moderated by Soho Forum director Gene Epstein.
While vaccine mandates are an infringement on freedom, some are justified due to their big payoff in lives saved. And here to defend the resolution, to take the affirmative, Ilya Somin. Ilya, please come to the stage. Taking the negative on the resolution, Angela McArdle. Angela, please come to the stage.
Now, one thing I love about Angela is that you look at her and she is a very beautiful, slightly built woman. And you would just never guess what a powerhouse she is. She really takes you off guard.
Okay, I'm going to yield the podium to you, Ilya. You have 15 minutes to defend the resolution. Take it away, Ilya. You'll be timed in the audience, and we'll be warning you. Take the podium.
Now, obviously, this will last a lot longer than 15 minutes because we're going to be going at least through most of it, statement by statement. Not all of it. I haven't really decided. We're going to see how this goes.
I'd like to start by thanking Jean and the Soho Forum for organizing this event and all of you for coming. And I'll also say my name is Ilya Soman, and I'm the guy that was stupid enough to come and defend vaccine mandates in front of a mostly libertarian audience.
And you realize then that this is quite controversial. So for you to claim that this is justified on libertarian grounds, you must think an awful lot of yourself because you realize that most libertarians disagree with you. I don't know. That just, you got to have the head the side of a blimp, I think. He's gotten a lot of flack for this. So in one way, I'll give him credit, at least for having the courage to publicly defend. But it is to publicly defend an awful, awful idea.
Fools rush in where wise men fear to tread, and this may be an example of that phenomenon.
Maybe is.
However, my task is easier than it looks at first sight, and that's so for a couple of reasons. One is the resolution doesn't say that I have to defend all vaccine mandates of any kind, just that some of them are justified because they save lots of lives.
Okay, just because something saves lots of lives doesn't make it justified. You know, the movie The Matrix, that a lot of us like to use as an example with the blue pill, red pill thing. I'm not going to go to that direction, but what I am going to go to, you could keep everybody perfectly safe if you put them in a coma and you let them live an alternative reality in their head. They will live the maximum life that they can as far as length of time goes because they will never encounter any real danger. Now, of course, he would say that's a massive infringement on liberty, so therefore it isn't justified. But I am just saying that just because a massive number of lives can be saved, and nobody's lives are ever saved, are they? We all die. The death rate is 1-to-1. So really, I know we use this expression, so I'm not picking on him for using this expression, but the more accurate way to say that is lives prolonged, I suppose. So, you know, what's that joke? The joke is, would you sleep with me for $5? You know, no, would you sleep with me for $1 million? Yes, I definitely would. Would you sleep with me for $5? What do you think I am, a prostitute? And the gentleman says, we've already established that fact, ma'am. Right now, we're just negotiating on the price. So here, we've already established the fact that Ilya is willing to prostitute out your rights. Right now, we are just negotiating on the price.
And second, the key point about vaccine mandates is that they're actually a very small burden, only a very small imposition on liberty. And in some contexts, I emphasize the word some.
Says to who? Listen, I am not a violent person, but the smug look on his face is making me feel a little stabby. Says to who? To a religious person who has a conscientious objection against the fact that stem cell fetal lines were used in the research for this vaccine. It's not a small imposition. Even if, and that's a rational reason. But even if you had a completely irrational reason, Jesus talked to you in a storm cloud and you decided that you just possibly can't do this because you're going to go, you know, to the HE double hockey sticks. It is not up to him. It's the smug patronizing that makes you think that you get to weigh other people's rights on this cosmic scale, and you don't get to do that. And, you know, he will deal with the slippery slope argument. I'm not sure if we're going to get to it in the time we have today, but at least he acknowledges that. But once you allow the camel's nose under the tent, The whole camel is soon to follow. And at the end of the camel is a big dump of camel droppings, okay?
They can save a lot of lives. And in fact, they are much smaller burdens and have a bigger payoff than even some infringements on liberty that most libertarians accept in other contexts.
Keyword most. And he's going to do a bait and switch here. Not all libertarians accept it in other contexts. And just because we happen to live with it doesn't mean that we accept it. Liberty is not a suicide pact. I could just absolutely violently protest every single infringement upon my liberty, but I wouldn't live for long. And I've decided for myself and my own self-respect that I could live with it within my own self-respect. And I'm going to accept certain things because it's worth it to me to live. But for other people, it's not. For other people, they decide to go down in flames for even smaller infringements upon their liberty, and that is up to them. That is not up to me. I am sure Ilya would say, so many lives are going to be lost in the Revolutionary War that you could pay a tax on that tea. It's just a small infringement upon your liberty. This is gross.
So I'm going to start off with what I think is actually a relatively easy case, and that is the defense of vaccination mandates when they're imposed in the private sector or on people like myself, government employees.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because he mentions how often he's a government employee as if he's like proud of this fact, which, you know, sucking on the government teat wouldn't make me proud. But he's going to make a distinction between public and private, and I felt Angela and her rebuttals did very well with this. And when it comes, let's just let it run. But I just want to let you know that that's the distinction he's about to make.
So we have seen both with COVID, but even before then, that some private employers require their employees to get vaccinated for various diseases, particularly in the healthcare sector, but sometimes elsewhere as well. Similarly, there are universities and other types of venues that require students or customers to get vaccinations. Once again, this long predates COVID, but obviously it's happened under COVID as well.
No, okay, there's been certain limited types of vaccine requirements. Okay, I'm going to have to address that after the break. Okay, let's continue where we left off. And if we remember, Ilya was talking about limited vaccine requirements for students of public institutions. And it's been very, very limited, and mostly you're talking about school-age children and perhaps school, adult students at public universities. Now, I don't agree with those at all because I disagree with public universities.
Similarly, there are universities and other types of venues that require students or customers to get vaccinations. Once again, this long predates COVID, but obviously it's happened under COVID as well. And I think this is very easily defended on even the purest of libertarian grounds.
No, it isn't.
Private organizations deciding for themselves who they want to associate with.
Are they really deciding for themselves? Or are they deciding under the coercion of government propaganda, which is funded by stolen taxpayer money?
And moreover, the restriction when it deals with vaccinations for deadly contagious diseases, it's one that helps ensure the safety of their employees and customers and so forth.
If vaccinations prevent you from becoming sick, then all that is needed to be done to protect yourself from getting sick is for you to choose to get vaccinated. Other people do not have to get vaccinated to protect you. Vaccines are supposed to protect you. But you might go, what about the vulnerable people? That is unfortunate, but you are not required to sacrifice your body or your rights to protect other people. You may choose to do so, but unfortunately, life isn't fair. And the people who are vulnerable need to make arrangements for their own safety and well-being. They cannot expect other people to sacrifice their bodies for them. That is just life.
You can make a similar point with respect to government requirements for government employees, including, yes, state university professors like myself.
No, actually, if the government was so concerned, they could just put you under glass. They could just put you in a bubble. And you can teach the students that way. You don't have to be forced by the government to have a needle stuck in you, and you shouldn't be able to, for your selfish reasons, have to force the students to do that as well. You do not control other people's bodies, no matter how much good you think you can do with that, because inserting something into somebody against their will in other contexts is called rape, Ilya. I don't want your needle in me any more than I want any other thing that you may wish to put in me that I don't want put in me. Am I clear? Consent means something.
I have to be vaccinated not just for the COVID, but for some other things for my job. And it's standard for employers to be able to impose burdens as a condition of employment that you might not impose if you're just attaching it to the general population.
He's going to go to some really, really bizarre examples here.
Indeed, compared to other burdens of employment, this one is actually a small one. I get the jab, within a few minutes I'm done, and I go on with my life. On the other hand,
and Angela points out very beautifully, we're not going to get to listen to her statement. I highly encourage you to go to tinyurl.com/mandatessuck for her to really rebut this. But no, you don't necessarily go on with your life. Some people develop heart conditions. Some people die. You don't get to sacrifice one life that doesn't wish to do that, Ilya. You just don't. I know you think you're a libertarian, but you're not.
Part of my job is that I have to sit through faculty meetings. Much, much worse.
Okay, you are actually, with that smug smile on your face, comparing having to sit through a meeting, which is actually part of your job, it actually has to do with your job, to me having to have a substance I don't want in my body forcibly injected in me to protect other people. You are seriously conflating the two with that look. How dare you? Who do you think you are?
Much more painful, much worse for my health too.
Then don't take that job that is actually part of the job. Getting vaccinated is not part of the job. You want to know what getting vaccinated would be part of a job, in which case I'd say you have to do it? If you took a job as a person who was getting paid to do a medical study on the vaccine, then I would say it's no reason to subject you to faculty meetings, but there is a reason, because it was part and parcel of the job to get the vaccine, because that's what you're getting paid for. You are being absolutely ridiculous. He's going to go on to describe having to drive to work. That's terrible, and you could get in an accident and all of this. And I find this so disrespectful to people who just want to maintain the integrity of their bodies.
Yet, if I don't sit through them, I could be penalized or fired. Similarly, coming to work on time every day is a bigger burden than having to get vaccinated. It's even a bigger risk to your physical health. On average, for most people, you're more likely to die or be seriously injured in a car accident on the way to work than you are by getting vaccinated either for...
You are more likely to get in an accident than you are of dying from COVID. Why don't you put that in there? And from dying from the flu. Where was your shock and awe and panic over the flu, Ilya?
19, or for the other diseases for which there are sometimes employer vaccination mandates. And on a slightly more serious note, for at least some types of government employees, there's actually a very strong moral case that they should be vaccinated. For example, for the police and firefighters, ordinary citizens often have no choice about dealing with those individuals.
And those ordinary citizens can be vaccinated if they think that is what will protect them. The fact is, those shouldn't... Well, okay, I almost went a little bit too far. And see, and I will admit when I do that, there is a libertarian case to be made for, say, fire and police. I'm an anarchist. I believe those should all be privately funded. But even in those cases, the private citizens can protect themselves. You are responsible for protecting yourself in these particular circumstances. You don't get to insist that other people have to violate their bodily integrity. There is nothing more sacrosanct than that. And I have a feeling now, looking at how we are only barely, what, 5 minutes in at least, of a 15-minute opening statement, that we will probably have to continue this in another episode. But let's see how far we get. But while I'm already talking in a break, let me tell you about approval voting, which is an alternative voting system. Approval voting will move us beyond two-party thinking. We need to get past the god-awful first-past-the-post system that we have, and approval voting is one of those systems that could do that. It will lead to fewer spoilers because voters can vote for both a candidate that they really like who has no chance of winning and also a more popular candidate who does have a chance of winning. It will lead to more civility. When a group of friends wants to stay friends and are trying to decide on a restaurant or a movie, they use a show of hands, and that is basic approval voting. And it will lead to less polarization because the voter is not forced to focus on only two candidates. Approval voting will help move us beyond two-party thinking. So contact my friend Frank Atwood and support Colorado's approval voting effort by phone or text at 720-439-6000 or search for the Approval Voting Party on the search engine of your choice. So let's continue now where we were on this debate.
And therefore, they owe it to us, if they're going to do their duty, to get vaccinated against deadly contagious diseases. I think there's a similar story for members of the armed forces. They too often have to deal with people who have no choice about being in proximity to.
Okay, you're sending them over, well, not you necessarily, because I assume that you don't support our foreign adventurism. I could be assuming wrong, Elia, but I'm thinking the best of you. We're more worried about them giving COVID than going over there and going to other people's countries, basically being an invader and like murdering them. Okay. And the armed forces should not be having to deal with, in involuntary situations, American people. You should not be accepting that as a given, Ilya.
And also, if the soldiers or police or firefighters, if they themselves come down with a deadly disease, that means while they have it, they can't do their duty and they're not doing the thing that they contractually signed.
That is just biologically, biological reality, dude. Are we going to now start controlling what they eat? How many hours of sleep they get? I mean, should we have a monitor on them constantly? What if they're watching too much pornography and it might distract them? Dude, what you are suggesting leads to Nightmare Town.
Up to do. So that's another reason that justifies the imposition in those cases. So just on sort of the low-hanging fruit of my side of this resolution, private mandates for they're voluntarily accepted.
They are not voluntary. When you're being absolutely brainwashed by the government, it is not voluntary.
Through contract that as a condition of employment, or government mandates on people like myself, government employees who come in contact with members of the public and therefore risk spreading contagious disease.
Right now you're risking spreading contagious ideas. Gross rights violating ideas. Should you be prohibited from doing that, Ilya?
I think there's a strong case at the very least for vaccination mandates in those situations. And that alone, I think, is enough to justify the very limited resolution that we're talking about here today. However, I'm going to be a bit more controversial and risque and point out that there are going to be some cases where it is justifiable to impose mandates, yes, through the government, even on members of the public who, unlike me, do not actually work for the government or get government paychecks. The reason for this, again, is that this is actually a very small imposition on liberty.
Okay, we're going to stop there, and we will continue after the break. Grab your barf bags. Okay, so we are continuing.
The jab, you can almost immediately go on with your normal life.
Unless you die or get heart conditions, those little pesky things. Because the risk of you dying is worth it. It's a small infringement upon your freedom if it saves other lives, you terrible person, you.
There's a small number of people for whom that's not true. People who suffer unusually great health risks for whatever reason from getting vaccinated.
And doctors today are scared to give exceptions because of the COVID terrorism.
People, I totally agree, they should be exempted from vaccination mandates, and in almost all currently existing mandates or proposed ones, they do have exemptions.
No, they don't, because doctors are scared to give them the notes.
You can argue about, and we can discuss in questions, whether there should also be exemptions for religious objections. In practice, there's only a very small portion of the US population, at least, that has religious objections.
Really? Really? Or ones that you accept. But there should also be, if we're going to have mandates, which we shouldn't, conscientious objections. You see, I am a religious person myself, but I find it abhorrent. I find it repellent that religion is privileged. Anyone's conscience, anyone's higher calling, anyone's metaphysics, whether they believe in a God or not, are part of an organized religion or not, should be paramount. Vermont used to have what was called a conscientious objection or a philosophical objection, and that should still be allowed everywhere.
Vaccination. Now, why is the vaccination justified? Why is even a small burden defensible? The reason is that it can save, at least in some contexts, many hundreds of lives.
And so could just locking everyone in their house during flu season. Now, I know he would say that's too big of a burden, but really, what price is there on life, Elia? Why do you get to decide this? You don't get to decide what my freedom is worth.
If you look at the history of those contagious diseases that we have gotten under control, measles, polio.
And the people who get vaccinated don't get measles. If you don't want to get measles, get vaccinated, or if you don't want to take the risk. But, you know, there was this funny meme. Now, I know it's not entirely on point, but it brings the point home. It says, what if the government said everyone had to wear diapers for the 1% chance that you might crap yourself in public? Okay. Now, what if they said you had to wear diapers to keep your neighbor from crapping himself in public?
Smallpox and some others, every one of them vaccination.
Polio and smallpox were already on the decline at the time vaccines came around. Now, I am not an anti-vax person. I'm not a vaccine denier or whatever other nasty name you would put on me. I do think that those were technological marvels. I also don't think they should have been mandated.
A large role, and sadly, in every one of these cases, vaccination mandates also played a significant role. We probably could not have gotten to the point where those diseases are only very minor threats, or in the case of smallpox, completely eradicated without vaccination mandates. And
I actually think we could have, because unlike COVID, which for most people is a minor cold, have you ever seen a case of smallpox? Most people seeing a case of smallpox, and the fact that that has been the most deadly killer, most people don't know. That and tuberculosis have been the scourges of mankind. But smallpox is disfiguring, and most people are vain. Most people would have gotten voluntarily vaccinated against smallpox. Smallpox was a terror. How dare you, you piece of crap, to compare smallpox to COVID?
History behind this. Notice the resolution does not say, that this is only about COVID mandates, even if you think that the COVID vaccine.
It's a good thing Angela, who's much more diplomatic than I am, debated this guy. I give it up to her. And, sometimes I can't control my tongue. I am glad she is running to be the leader of my party.
Are too unreliable or otherwise problematic, there are still vaccination mandates in other contexts for other diseases that have existed for a long time that could be defensible. And that's all I really need to prove to show my limited side of this resolution. However, it is also the case that COVID vaccines, and yes, COVID vaccine mandates, do have a valuable role to play.
No, they don't. And the fact is, this is just a fact of biological life. The stark reality that we are living in a biological world and you're a biological being does not turn you into a biological weapon. This is just what is called deal with it, reality, as all of our parents should have taught us.
Both in the US and around the world, the introduction of vaccines has massively reduced both mortality from COVID and serious hospitalization and disease from COVID and the like. Probably 90% or more of the people who are dying recently or going to hospital recently because of COVID in the US.
Well, and you know that there's an 80%, as Angela put it, and I'm trusting her statistics, and I will correct myself publicly if I am proven wrong on this. There's an 80% increase in miscarriages. And pregnant women are not exempt from most of these vaccine mandates. How dare you? You're sacrificing the unborn for yourself.
In Europe, they're sadly the unvaccinated. Moreover, the issue is not just protecting the individuals themselves who get vaccinated. If it was only that, I would be opposed to mandates. I don't think.
Okay, then you should be opposed to mandates. Because you don't have a right to force other people to undergo an invasive medical procedure in order to protect other people. You say libertarians are selfish? You are selfish to require that of other people. And no, you're not a libertarian.
There should be mandates to protect you from your own bad judgment. However, the data also shows pretty consistently that the vaccinated also risk spreading the disease much less.
I'm not so sure that is true, but the fact is they still spread it, don't they, Ilya?
In both the US and data from Israel and elsewhere, a person who gets the COVID vaccine, they're about 6.
And here's the thing, I'm not jabbed, and I'm pretty firm in remaining unjabbed. I have traveled throughout this entire time, except for maybe when this first started, when everything was shut down. But ever since you were able to travel again, I've traveled extensively. I've probably been on over 20 plane trips over a year and a half. I was hugging on patient zero at PorkFest, as Angela also was. I've never caught it. Now, am I lucky? Maybe. Maybe I have some kind of natural resistance. But this inevitability that you are just describing here in this panic attack, you are an utterly irresponsible, disgusting person.
10 times less likely to be infected by COVID than a person who doesn't, if you control for other variables. And in addition, even if they are infected, they're somewhat less likely to spread the disease. This is data from the Delta variant. I fully admit we don't yet know for sure whether the Omicron variant that just came around is going to be like this or not. I think early data suggests the vaccines still limit the spread, but if it turns out that they don't, I'm perfectly willing to admit.
And you think that these multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies who are immune from liability and all of the pockets they are lining will ever admit this? What faith you have. What faith you have. And what a big mouth you have, Grandma. My God. History is not going to look kindly on you and your ilk, Ilya. They are not. You've just got so much nerve that my indignant libertarian lather level is going to nuclear. That's really all I can say here. And I know we are going to have to continue this in a future podcast, but let's let them go on a little more.
That would weaken the case for vaccine mandates unless and until we have a vaccine that actually does constrain Omicron like it previously constrained Delta and Alpha and others. Even with vaccination mandates that could be justified, it is not my claim that they can be justified in every conceivable mechanism or circumstances. I'm not in favor of saying, as the government of Austria has done, that the unvaccinated should be completely locked up in their houses.
Why not? If this is just a small imposition on liberty that is so eminently justifiable. Why shouldn't you punish these wrongdoers that are unjustifiably withholding their bodies from the cause of public safety? You later go on, and we'll deal with this in a future episode, to say, you know, even though everyone pays for this, including the people who eventually receive it most of the time, public welfare recipients shouldn't get it. Shouldn't get it. Even though I'm opposed to welfare, I don't oppose, you know, removing medical autonomy from poor people just because you can. Shouldn't get benefits. Disgusting. Absolutely revolting. Well, we will continue with this next show. I remind you guys, the Libertarian Party of Colorado convention is coming up. You can go to lpcolorado.org for more info. And I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday. Until I can talk to you again, live free. Mi guapas de libertad.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business, not because they want to